Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Stefan Jordan. I'm with Small Business for America's Future, and thank you so much for joining us for our small business informational session on PPP. Just to get started here, some quick housekeeping. Some of you are probably very familiar with this screen now or using Zoom over these past few months. But if you've got a question, feel free to either raise your hand or if you have something, we really encourage folks to put it into the chat box, and we'll try and go through those later. We are trying to live stream this, and also we are recording it, so we will send this back out to everyone if you have to drop off early. So we will have a full session here for you to look at later. Before we get started, just going to start off with a quick video that kind of gives a little bit of background about Small Business for America's Future and who we are.
America's small businesses account for half of all private sector jobs and are our country's main engine for employment growth. Without them, the U.S. economy will collapse. Small businesses pulled the economy out of the Great Recession. They can do the same now, but they need our help. Small business needs a strong new voice in Washington, one that will fight for Main Street, one that will make sure policymakers hear the concerns of America's entrepreneurs, and one that will ensure small businesses are at the center of our efforts to rebuild a more equitable economy. We know that the ingenuity, hard work, and determination of America's small business owners can lead to a great recovery. Small Business for America's Future is here to make sure everyone else, including our policymakers, know it too. Join us in the fight for small business and for America's future.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Renee Johnson, and she's going to go ahead and get us started with our program. She is a special advisor to the Small Business for America's Future team. Renee, over to you.
Hello and good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Thank you for joining us today for this very important informational session on the PPP with the new updated rules and guidelines. I want to first talk about a little bit about Small Business for America's Future. We are here to ensure we are representing the policy needs of small business owners. Our expanded policy portfolio includes creating a just and equitable economy that works for small business owners, their employees, and their communities by creating and supporting programs and policies that promote the economic security of small businesses. We also work to create fair and equitable COVID-19 recovery plans that truly support Main Street. And finally, we're working to correct market failures that have resulted in unbearably high healthcare costs and creation of affordable options for entrepreneurs and their employees. As Stefan mentioned, my name is Renee Johnson, and I'm the Senior Advisor here at Small Business for America's Future. Today, I am joined with two amazing tax accountants, and they are also going to share some wonderful information about how we can get through this new PPP. First up, we have Maria Nost. She is a partner at the Zimmerman and Company, CPA. And we have one of our co-chairs to the Small Business for America Future, Anne Zimmerman, and she's also the founder and creator and partner to Zimmerman and Company CPAs. I'm so excited to turn it over to you two to provide some great information.
Thank you so much, Renee. I'll get started. I know we have a lot of information to cover, although we'll probably still be more general than some of you want. As you know, at the end of the year, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, or the CAA as we call it, is made up of a lot of different acts. And one of the biggest things it did is it relaunched and expanded PPP loans, in addition to some other things. So another thing that I think is of great interest is that it also attempted to make this more equitable. It set aside all sorts of amounts for CDFIs, MDIs, first-time borrowers, minority businesses, that sort of thing, hoping that they would get a fairer shot at this, which we know didn't happen the first time. Okay. Then just last week, we had two new rules roll out. that by the Treasury and the SBA, we call them IFRs, or interim financial rules. And I tell you about those only because if you want to look for the questions they answered, that's where you go. The first one, 82 pages long, is sort of a recap of everything on the original PPPs. And the second one, about half that length, is on the new ones. But at the same time, we're still waiting for a ton of additional guidance on some of the other parts of the law. Before I move just into the PPP, next slide, Stefan, if I could, I want to just touch on the different forms of help. The PPP, which is our main goal for today, and if you could jump to the next one, Stefan, to get it, you go to a bank or a CDFI lender, some kind of a private lender.
Hi, it's Rhett. How are you?
Good. Hi, Rhett. You don't have to have any collateral or personal guarantees. And it's originally given to you as a loan, but then you go after forgiveness and it becomes a grant. It's based on payroll, and you have to spend a lot of it on payroll. There are now 2 rounds available. So if you already took it, you can take another draw. And if you haven't taken it, you can go back out. It's reopened that you can take it now. If something happens and you don't get it all forgiven, remember it started as a loan and you just end up with it being a loan. It's a very low interest rate. You pay it off over 2 to 5 years, and you have 10 months from the time you take it to get it forgiven or converted to a loan. I should be driving my own slides. Next slide. Okay. One of the other things I want to mention, though, is the EIDL, or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. You can take this even if you get a PPP now. There is an advance with it that's up to $10,000. So if you haven't gotten that yet, you want to go after that now. And that's $1,000 per employee. If you're a self-employed individual, independent contractor, that's $1,000. But hey, it's $1,000. For loan beyond the advance, you do have to have collateral at some amounts and credit checks and those sorts of things. And none is forgiven other than the original advance. Is never a loan. It's forgiven automatically. So it's a little bit higher rate. I think it's 375, 275 for nonprofits. But the thing to remember with this is if the PPP is not enough for you, you can get higher amounts on the EIDL than you can get on the PPP, and you can spend it on a much broader variety of categories. You don't have to just spend it on payroll. The next one, and I bring this up only because you can't overlap. And so the only reason, I'm not going to go into the details on this. We're still waiting on how to apply and what a lot of the details are. But they did pass this Save Our Stage or Shuttered Venue grant with this law. And the reason I bring this up is if you qualify for this, it's significantly more money for most of you than the PPP will be. And you cannot get this when it comes through if you have taken a PPP after 12/27/20. So that's the key takeaway here. If you do live performances, you're a booker, a producer. I've even talked to some people who do webinars or seminars live, and they pay by ticket and things. And until we see guidance, we're not sure, but they may qualify. This is the way you would want to go. So I don't want to go into detail, but you can get half your gross receipts from 19, which is huge. And then they give you half again, that much more in April. So if you have any live venues, movie theater, producers, bookers, stage managers, that sort of thing, this is for you instead of the PPP. And lastly, I want to mention unemployment benefits, because it's important to know that unemployment was extended with half of the additional federal 300. Next slide, Stefan. And half of the, it used to be 600, now it's 300, plus your state amount, at least your state minimum. And the important thing here to realize is that if you're self-employed and you can't get enough PPP because you don't have payroll, you don't have profits. I've run into some people who run a Schedule C and they've had a loss, so they don't qualify because it's, if you're a Schedule C, it's going to be based on your profit from 19 or maybe now 20. You can get unemployment probably. So don't rule this out. And it has to be coordinated somewhat with the PPP, but they've never explained how. So I'm not going into that. But know that you also have the option for unemployment if these other things don't work for you. Okay, now let's dig in a little more for the PPP loans. First thing, you can't, not just everybody can get a PPP loan. It's not just free money, as our clients like to call it. You have to be able to certify the need for funds because of the uncertainty right now that your business faces. So when you get a PPP loan, even though they're not asking you for a lot of proof and backup necessarily, you do have to sign off that the current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of your business. And I just want to point that out. It is open now for first and second draws. It opened today for second draws, Monday for first draws. If you go to small lenders, CDFIs, CDIs, CFIs, MDIs, all those alphabet soup things, which are basically community financial lenders. And in the resources, when we send this out and share things with you, will be a link that will let you find one in your area. Banks are going to open up next week probably, but know that you can start now with CFIs. And it's important to know that all forgiveness rules are the same for first and second draws. So I point that out to you. They're relaunching the second draw, they're relaunching the initial program right now. So it's first and second. If you haven't taken a first, you can now. The original PPP, you couldn't have more than 500 employees, and it was available for nonprofits if you were a 501c3. You can get up to 10 million, but that's if you had a lot of employees. And the loan size was figured at 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for 19, basically. There's some alternatives, but basically your 19 average monthly is what you used. I think it's interesting, there are about 5.2 million loans given out so far. And they only gave out 525 billion out of the 659 billion. But that tells us that it was about 100,000 per loan was the average. A number of them were multiple millions. So there were a ton of 20,000 or even less loans that were given out. They're all over the place. One other point I want to point out is they've made it clear that you can reapply if your first request was too low and you want to get more on the first draw. That's possible. So you can modify that first request, or if you returned your funds for any reason, you can apply now for the first draw and get it back again. The second draw, which is what we're all trying to figure out now, is very similar to the first PPP. So I think that's the first thing. Think about it as the same thing, except now there's a few extra limits. They want to make sure this is going to the smaller businesses, the minority businesses, and the businesses that are hurting. So they reduced the 500 to 300 employees max. They added in 501c6s, that might be a chamber of commerce or other community organization, and housing cooperatives. And the biggie is they added a requirement that your gross receipts, your sales, your revenue has to go down from 19 to 20. So you have to have had a 25% reduction in your gross receipts in 2020 in one quarter compared to that same quarter in 2019. Or if you don't track receipts by quarter, you can do it based on the annual 2020 to 2019. They figure if your whole year dropped, then probably one of your quarters did. The maximum loan has gone down from 10 million to 2, but you get to do the loan based on the same size other than restaurants and hospitality businesses, anything that starts with the NACES code of 72. And you can find those just looking up NACES code on the internet, or you can look on the top page of your tax return and you're probably going to see it. So you can look at that, and more is available for those. Also, if we flip to the next.
And I'd just like to interrupt. A few people have asked questions about defining the quarter, and if it could be, does it have to be a calendar quarter or a 3-month period? And the guidance on that from SBA is it's a calendar quarter.
Thanks, Maria.
They're also, so if we speak just to clear that up for people.
Okay. And also, Maria, I know somebody was asking, can you get a second idle? And I think the answer is no to that. Do you agree with that? We're talking about PPPs mainly today, but
yeah, there are a lot of questions about idle coming in, and that is through the SBA. They really, if you got an idle advance, they followed up with you about taking that farther to take an actual loan, and they wanted you, the SBA wanted you to respond to that initial application.
Right, because idles you get actually directly from the SBA, not through your bank. So on this second draw PPP, you have to have spent your entire PPP one, your first draw, before you can draw the second one, but you don't have to have it forgiven yet. So we do know that. And one of the things that makes this nice, if you borrow from the same bank or lending institution, and you're just going in for the same 2.5 times your 19 average monthly payroll, you're not going to have to submit any new documentation for your payroll. They already have that on file to support your payroll costs. So that makes it a little bit easier. Another quirk in there is that if your loan is less than 150,000, you don't actually have to submit and prove your reduction in sales. Remember the 25% reduction in sales by quarter. You can just tell them, you sign off that it's down and get the loan now, the money, and do all that documentation on the back end. Remember, if you weren't allowed it, it becomes a loan. So you have to certify that it happened, but you don't have to prove it just yet. And they did release their application for the second draw. It's very similar to the first, and we'll put that in the resources as well. It came out, I think, Friday. Next slide. Let's talk about a little bit now about forgiveness. I know we want to get to some question and answers, and Maria's going to jump in and help with that, but we'll get there. So when you go for forgiveness, they already released the form that's supposed to be the simplified forgiveness request for PPPs if you were under $50,000. But we've recommended to our clients they not file that yet, because an even easier one is coming for the 150,000. And that was passed in this new bill, and they have agreed, and they know it's coming. It'll be a 1-page certification form that you just sign off that you used it the way you were supposed to, and you qualified, and you're not going to have to submit. Basically, it's going to become almost automatic forgiveness. So I'd wait till that new form comes out. Now with the second one, that's the one that's a little bit different. You're going to have to show the difference in the gross receipts. When you sign off, or if you have to prove your expenses because you're a little bit higher, or you get pulled for audit, because they will audit a fair number of these. I've listed here what you can spend it on. They expanded the list a little bit this time. It's still 60% payroll and 40% other eligible expenses. Payroll still includes health insurance. It includes state unemployment because that's a state or local tax imposed on the employer. You can also use it for mortgage interest. You can use it for rent and utilities. So basically your facilities, and they added on that you can use it for any kind of COVID protection costs if you're having to buy signs or masks or those sort of things. Or there's a very specific thing for uninsured property damage, which is interesting, I guess, for the 2020 year, and some other supplier costs and expenses. So it gets a little broader on your operations of what you can use it on, but it still remains that 60% has to be used for payroll. One of the big changes on forgiveness that applies to both PPP-1 and PPP-2 is the covered period, which is the period during which you have to spend your PPP funds, right? And this has been something that's been the topic of much discussion and debate in Congress and everywhere else. And they ended up saying you can be anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks and you get to pick your period. So that makes it much more flexible. If you had to lay people off and then bring them back later, or if you had them on early and couldn't keep them on later, you can do it in a more compact or expanded time period. Payroll never includes more than $100,000 a year annual rate for any employee. So you can't overpay owners and things like that. There's some checks and balances on that. But no, the other change, one other change that was made is the idle, excuse me, the idle advance originally had to be deducted from what you got forgiven on the PPP. You couldn't get both of them, and that's no longer true. You do not have to report your idle advance when you're getting your PPP forgiven. And finally, the big one to me in a lot of ways is that they clarified that they're not going to be taxed on the PPP proceeds. The original bill had said that was the intent, but then the IRS, the Treasury came out with Notice 2020-32, which said, okay, you don't have to add the income in, but you don't get to deduct the expenses, which is in essence the same as adding the income in. So it made it taxable. This new bill, the CAA, overruled that and made it clear that you may deduct the expenses that you spend with it, and you do not have to report the income. So it truly is tax-free income. The timing of all this. Okay, we talked a little bit ago. It's already open now, and you can apply if you go to a CFI, a community institution, and we will give you a list of where to find it. And that's because they're trying to focus on lending to the underserved populations of through local organizations. And if you don't know which banks have less than the required number in assets, then this list will help you when we post it on the resources. And that just gives them a couple-day head start. They have not said clearly when the other banks will be starting, but we think it'll be Monday that your bank will be able to start with the loans. The CFIs relaunched the first loan on Monday and then started offering the second loan today, although there was a lot of concern that they wouldn't be ready. So I'm not sure if they're all able to do that. You have until March 31st of this year to apply for a loan and get this loan taken care of. And we will note, although we can't promise this, that a lot of people are saying, the administration is saying that they don't think these funds will run out the way the first ones did. So take it and believe it if you want. I can't promise anything. I do want to warn you that these loans will be a little bit slower in going through than the first round, because they've put some new fraud detection processes in that these will have to run through, and that's going to take an extra day or two. They're going to run them, I think, overnight to try to eliminate some of the fraud. Okay. That is the overview that I wanted to push through in my 20 minutes. It looks like we just about did it, Renee.
Yeah, and that's
right on that. I apologize for talking so fast, but I did want to get through because I know people are going to have questions for Maria and myself.
Yes, and Anne and Maria, we want to say thank you so much. That was a lot of great information. And I know there are tons of questions flying around. There are Q&A questions. There's questions in the chat. So don't worry, we're going to try to get a couple of them. I want to just be very clear, though, and let you guys know, Anne and Maria cannot answer very specific questions that are tailored to your specific and unique needs. There might be some that we ask for general responses, but that does not mean it is exactly what you should or ought to do because they don't know the details of your situation. So just putting that out there, letting people know in advance. Let's get it going. We have a lot of questions, guys.
Yeah.
We'll try to get through as many as possible. How does forgiveness work for PPP for people who've taken the first PPP?
So Anne, I've been reading the questions while Anne's been giving the presentation, and there are a lot of people talking about forgiveness. Hopefully you have not applied for forgiveness yet. That's the number one. I know some large banks, KeyBank, for example, just stopped. They closed their forgiveness down when this new law came out. And so that is because if you are under $150,000 PPP, your first draw, this simplified, Anne mentioned automatic, it is, you still need to, and someone asked this question, the SBA could still audit you. They have you have to keep your records for 3 years and the payroll records for 4 years if you're under the 150,000. So wait for that. The SBA actually had 21 days to come out with that simplified form, so they're still inside that window, but it should be here within the next couple of weeks. If you're over 150,000, you will still need to do the full forgiveness form that was released last fall. You have to do a lot more calculations. You really want to make sure that is taken care of. And forgiveness, Renee, is can be up to 100% of your PPP. It's no longer reduced by your EIDL advance, so long as you spend it in your covered period, at least 60% on payroll.
And don't reduce your payroll too much. There is a calculation, and in the resource field, I think I've got a link to that calculation that you can run through that both does how much can I borrow and how do I know if I kept enough payroll on to be able to certify that. Maria, interesting question. I noticed somebody got a forgiveness less their EIDL grant or advance. Do you think they can get that back?
And I responded to that one. That is, they're awaiting guidance. That question has been posed to the SBA.
Yeah.
Should that EIDL advance that you didn't have forgiven be returned to your bank so it could be returned to you? We don't know. But I think part of applying for forgiveness early, you're going to lose out on that.
Is it not the case that you had to have been in business at a given date to get the second draw?
Same as first. You have to be in business. February 15th, 2019.
Okay.
Right? And so one other thing while we're still on this topic, Renee, because there's been a lot of this about payroll, what about I pay 1099 contractors instead of employees. I can't afford to run payroll, etc. Those questions, your PPP loan is calculated based on your payroll costs from 2019, the first round, right? And so if you weren't running payroll in 2019, you weren't eligible for, oh, excuse me, if you were self-employed, if you had a Schedule C or self-employment income, you were also eligible. So
based on your Schedule C profits.
Right.
So if you were a Schedule C in 19 with no payroll, then you take your Schedule C, divide it by 12, multiply it by 2.5. That's what you get on your PPP each time. And you can use your 19 for both the first and second draw, or I believe you can use 20. Can use 20 for
yes. And so this is yes. And so someone else had asked this for calculating your payroll costs. For now, what your average monthly payroll is to calculate your new PPP, it is based on, you can choose if it's on 2020 payroll or self-employment earnings. And so that's a new benefit to use that. And one, I know I have a lot of notes here, Renee.
No worries. And I'm going to let you get that last thought out, but we have quite a few questions. So I was going to go to the next one after that thought you have right there.
Okay. No, and it was just that's not usually the case, because if your gross receipts dropped 25% in one quarter, your payroll probably didn't go up. So that's an option for everybody, but it probably isn't going to happen.
Thank you. We're getting questions also that are asking, what should someone do if they do not have a relationship with a bank or a tax accountant? How can they get help right now?
And so I think that Anne, in Anne's resources, she did put the SBA link to the CDFIs. And I know I did see a question that there weren't any in their region offering this program. This is a hard question, Renee, because banks and credit unions and all lenders, they are allowed to participate in this or not. And so we really, finding a credit union that you can find a person there, an employee, to actually build a good relationship with. And that really just takes calling and building those relationships. And I think the best way to find a good tax advisor is through referrals. For example, right now we are only can take new clients from referrals of current clients and things like that, because there are just so many. So really reaching out to, you're another small business in this, in this group, and saying, hey, do you have someone that you could recommend, and get that referral contact into a tax advisor.
And I know some of the people asked that, Renee, and said, well, my local ones aren't. I think you can go remotely. So go to this list that we're going to post up in the resources and try some of these that are doing it remotely. They don't have to be near you physically.
Yeah, and we got some great responses to that question too, because again, this is a community, and that's what this is all about, people helping people during this definitely difficult time. So Anne Fierva, she mentioned that you can go to SBDCs. Vince, he mentioned that the SBA has a lender match program. So there's definitely opportunities. And as you guys both mentioned, we will send some stuff out as a resource for people as well. Have a question as well that says, what's your advice for small firms that cannot afford to run payroll?
Well, I think Maria addressed that some, and that's the calculation. Somebody asked me to put it again.
Yeah, that one keeps coming.
Don't run payroll, then you want to go with the unemployment that I mentioned earlier. If yourself or those independent contractors you're paying for your small business will qualify for unemployment, and even you can qualify for unemployment while you're trying to work your business and not making money. So don't underestimate that. You might be able to get some retroactive also. So definitely look for that. Consider an idle. You don't have to have payroll to do that. So that would be another possibility.
Another question is the cap of what the loan is 2.5 times your monthly payroll can be more or added for expenses, or is that the limit? So if my salary was about $5,000 a month, I would get 2.5 times that.
That is correct. Up to a salary of 100,000 a year. So that would work. And you would get, so that would be 12.5 if you were actually on payroll and you had a 60,000 a year salary, which is 5,000 a month. Same thing if you were a Schedule C, if you had a 60,000 net profit, but no employee, you could count 2.5 times that, or 12.5 of that towards that's your salary.
And I think it's important, and I think that's important that your salary, you know, a lot of small businesses who take distributions and not actually running it through payroll, it's an important distinction. Your 1099 contractors, those payments are not payroll costs. Payroll costs have to be wages that you as the employer paid, you know, Social Security and Medicare match on.
And somebody's asking if my revenue's down and I have paid payroll, do I get to do it? Yes, you definitely go. You're exactly the kind of person that you want. This was SCORE Jacksonville. Your revenue's down 50%, you definitely qualify. And if your payroll, Maria will correct me if I'm wrong on this one, that's why I pay attention there. If your payroll is higher in 20 than in 19, you can use that as your basis for draw 2, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And
so it's
Renee,
based on that, but you have to have that sales revenue reduction.
Renee, a lot of people are asking about the resources, and I don't know if you want to, if you know how they're going to be distributed.
We will definitely send out after this wonderful webinar a copy of the recording and also links to the resources Anne and Maria are speaking about. So we'll make sure of that. I want to go to a question from Wendy Buckner. How is the proof of a 25% reduction in revenue handled for new businesses that started after 1/1/2020, before the 2/15/2020 requirement? Since we weren't in existence and had no income in 2019, are they eligible?
And I think there's special rules on those that are beyond the scope of this, unless you've got them summarized, Maria.
I do not, and I think I saw that question, Renee. Also,
I could find it and add it to the resources if you'd like, so they have an answer later.
Yeah,
that's a good question.
And if you want to drop it in the chat too, so that people can see it, because I think it'll be quite a resounding appreciation to that question for many new entrepreneurs who are entering the market during a very difficult time as well.
Okay.
I want to go to another question from Marsha Campbell. Is there any possibility of redoing your loan forgiveness application after approval if there were errors, or what is the appeals process? Excuse me.
For your PPP, yes, they said specifically you can go back to the bank and amend it, modify.
No, Anne, sorry, she asked about forgiveness application, not the borrow application.
And that one's not as clear. Some of what I've read says if you're forgiven, you're out of luck. So I'm not sure on that answer. I think we're waiting for more guidance on that.
We have someone from a SCORE in Jacksonville who asked, my revenue is down 50%. However, I still have made payroll. Can I still apply for PPP?
And that's the one I answered before. And I think I confused someone because they said, well, you mentioned 50%.
Yeah.
Okay. That gentleman said, or woman said 50%. So I mentioned it. You only need 25%. And yes, you can. That's exactly what it's meant for.
Renee, I think that there are many questions about gross receipts So I'd like to circle back to how do you know if you're eligible for PPP2? And the interim final rule that Anne mentioned, that has a gross receipts definition. It's a 42-page document available. It'll be in your resource. It's available on, if you go to the SBA. And on both pages 8 and pages 22, it defines that. Many people referenced, does it have to be what's on my tax return? The rules reference amounts that you can find on your tax return. They reference total income, which is a line on your tax return. They reference gross income, which is on your Schedule C. And so really one thing that they are offering is, again, if your loan is going to be, your PPP2 loan is going to be under 150, you can provide that proof of the 25% decrease in gross revenue at a later date when you apply for forgiveness. And at that time, your 2020 tax return will likely be done. And so one thing that they're allowing borrowers to do, Renee, that's really helpful is to make that proof of the 25% reduction. You can actually use your 2020 tax return and your 2019 tax return. So if you have that 25% in the whole year of 2020 compared to the whole year annual of 2019, that's a really easy proof. You know, really you're going to want to go to the quarter by quarter by quarter to show it if you can't show it over the whole year. So many businesses have lost revenue over the whole year by 25%, and you can just use that now and apply in making the determination if you can apply, and you can use that from your tax return later when you apply for forgiveness of PPP2.
Somebody also asked if they still have some savings and reserves, does that disqualify them? They don't even look at that. That's not an issue. You meet these other requirements, you're good. And also someone said, are the other forms of the stimulus included in gross receipts? They are not. They clarified that, like your earlier PPP or certainly your individual stimulus payments, those are not included in your gross receipts. So that answers a couple of them. I know we have like 100 questions or something here.
Over here, yeah.
You have some more for us, Renee, or should we be?
Oh, I have plenty for you.
Okay.
So we have Yvette Montalvallo. She asked, what if we have lowered our salaries during this time? Do we request our original salary or the new cost of salaries?
Then I would go with the original, because that's probably what you were paying in 19, and you can still use your 19 payroll to calculate your second draw of the PPP and the first draw. So you don't have to jump to your 2020 payroll if 19 was higher. Someone else asked if I'm an independent contractor in my company applied, can I apply? Independent contractors are separate businesses. So yes, you would apply for your own. You also can get unemployment. So if you're an independent contractor and your revenue went away, you can do that. If you had profits and your revenue, you didn't stop working, then you may be able to get the PPP as an independent contractor.
So I want to circle back because I'm seeing questions just to get clarification. Did I hear you say we could amend your original PPP? We have unclaimed, but Chase said we could not appeal. Is there a link for that? If so, I want to make sure that we clarify the appeals, and if you have errors, that's for forgiveness and not the original loan request. Is that correct?
Right. They haven't given us any information on appealing forgiveness. But they have said, I believe in the rules that we're going to give you a link to, that you can go back and modify your PPP original loan amount. Remember, it's a loan and then you get it forgiven. So you can get more on the PPP loan. You can't necessarily go back to the well on the idle if you've already taken a loan. But on the PPP, if you've taken a loan and you realize I didn't take enough, you can go back and ask them for more. And that would be going back to the bank. So I don't know if that person is talking about forgiveness or taking the loan, but Chase should be the one that does that for them.
Got it. And we also have some questions about nonprofits coming in. Does any of this work for nonprofits, and are there any requirements that they need to meet in order to apply for a PPP loan?
Nonprofits are just as eligible so long as they are one of the 501, you know, that one of the 501.
C3 got the first draw.
Yep.
C3s and C6s or housing cooperatives, a few other weird ones, get the second draw. C6s didn't get the first draw, but they get the second.
And Renee, they have the same eligibility requirements under 300 for PPP2, under 300 employees, those same types of requirements.
Got it. Can self-employed Schedule C filers use PPP2 for owner replacement compensation, which will allow the 100% on payroll?
Do I understand the question?
Can you read it one more time?
Yolanda, if you want to be able to clarify that, we could come to you. Just chat that a little bit more explanation of your question. Another one, James Wang. If we have increased payroll costs since PPP1, are we able to increase PPP2 amount? If we are using same lender, is there an option to increase the amount the second time?
Yes, there. If you are eligible because of the 25% reduction in revenue, and your payroll costs increased in 2020, you should, when you apply for PPP2, use the higher 2020 payroll cost, average monthly payroll cost. Your lender should require new documentation. So I know we mentioned that if you're basing it on 19 payroll costs, the same as PPP1 with the same lender, you don't even necessarily need to provide documentation, but obviously you're using a new base. If you're going to use 2020 payroll costs, then you need to provide documentation, but your lender should accept that, and your PPP2 loan would therefore be higher than your PPP1 loan.
Got it.
And I can answer a couple quick ones here, Renee. Someone said, can we apply to more than one bank? Well, you can only take the loan from one bank for each loan. You don't have to use the same bank for two as you did for one, but it's easier. You can apply to two, I guess, and just take it from one.
We discourage that because because both those banks are going to be submitting to the SBA, and in the first round we saw sometimes the SBA would kick them all out of the program. So that's up.
We don't think it's a good idea. And of course, if it's the EIDL, you only go right to the SBA. Someone else asked, do I need to send my banking reports for forgiveness? If you want forgiveness for your PPP and it's less than 150, you don't need to send any of that. You're just going to sign a one-page form that is not released yet. So be patient. Don't apply for forgiveness till that form comes out. It's just not out yet. I don't know, Renee, if we'll be doing more seminars or sending out more information, but I can certainly let you know when that happens. And thirdly, I'm starting a new business, Brian says. In February, would I be eligible for either PPP? No, because you weren't in business on, I don't remember the date. You said it, Maria.
Yeah, February 15th.
Yep.
2020, right?
2019 for round one, 2020 for round two.
Okay, so there's a few questions.
Yeah, we'll take a couple more because we see the time has definitely got away. And there's tons of questions, and I know everyone, this is a confusing time, but yet, you know, the resources are there. Some of the resources that Anne and Maria mentioned, I just dropped into the chat function. So please feel free to copy them now. So you don't have to wait for that email that we're going to send out later. You could copy that now and get to work to figuring out your solution to your unique issue. Quick question from Phoebe. We'll do like two more. If you applied for the first round of EIDL and your application is still under review, should you reapply for the second round of EIDL?
There is no second round of EIDL. You get one EIDL loan. If you didn't ever take the first, if you never applied, then you didn't get the advance. So when the EIDLs first opened, if you applied, they gave you free, people were calling it free money. They gave you an advance up to $10,000 that was calculated as $1,000 per employee that you have. You were self-employed, you were one. So that was called an advance. If you never got that, you can get that now, they've reopened. If you've already gotten that, then they contacted you, hopefully, and you should have by now decided, I do or don't want to take the loan. If you've taken a loan, you can't take another.
One more question we have is, could you please address self-employed individuals and PPP and EIDL possibilities? There's a number of them that are here tonight that seem to be sole proprietors and are really seeking some sort of guidance and help there.
Yeah, and I think if you do not have employees and you have a Schedule C, it's almost simple to get the, because it's clearly the definition of your average monthly payroll costs for applying for PPP is your net income on your Schedule C, right? And so that's maxed to $100,000 if you're a sole proprietor. So, and if whatever that number is, you divide it by 12, that's your average monthly payroll. The most it could be is $100,000 qualifies, divided by 12, 8,333. You multiply that by 2.5 months. That's how much the PPP you're eligible for, right? And so you are eligible for $20,833 maximum PPP. If you're a sole proprietor, you have a Schedule C. Now, if you have a Schedule C that showed a loss, you are not eligible for, in 2019, you are not eligible. We did have this question, Anne, what if you show an income in 2020? I don't know that we have the answer. And for example, Renee, we have a client who had a Schedule C, he made about $12,000. He was still eligible. He got a $2,500 PPP loan. I believe he got it from one of the bigger lenders, Citizens Bank or something.
Thank you for that. I know the sole proprietors are like, thank you. I also want to clarify something that Monday, the PPP opened up. It was not EIDL that opened on Monday. It was just the PPP that was opened up. So I know there's a lot of questions about, is EIDL, can they apply now? No, the website is not going to allow you to apply at this time. So definitely just stay tuned. I think we'll try to put something out on our social to keep people updated. So we'll work on trying to make sure everyone is aware of when things are going live. Someone else said EIDL is open now. I know the website is, and it might be down because that is something that happened before last year when they first opened up some of the loan programs, the websites were crashing. So what we can do is take a look and find out for sure what's happening to make sure that it's not actually crashing again. So thank you guys to the chat. And again, this is a great community of people here. Anne and Maria, just want to give you guys a few seconds to kind of give a last parting words for everyone.
One thing that we didn't address is K1s. I don't know if you want to try it, Maria. We maybe don't have enough time. I apologize we didn't get to that. It's weird. Partners have to come under partnerships, I will say. Partners can't go for their own.
Yeah, K1 income does not make anyone eligible for PPP.
It doesn't get you anywhere, basically. I wish I could get into it more, but yeah, that's kind of crazy. So like big law firms and things where the partners are, the law firm got the money, not the lawyers, if that makes sense. That's the way I think of it. So I hope we answered some of your questions. an hour goes very fast. And I'm so appreciative to have Maria and Renee here. I don't know all the answers. Every day I reach out to my partners and say, okay, I've just turned myself around once again. And what about this situation? So don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself some grace. The resources that we gave you, a lot of them are really easy, kind of walk through step-by-step bullet points that have come out. And I hope you find them helpful, and join us again if we do another one of these. Renee will tell us if we're doing that. She runs this show for me.
I'm just here to make sure that you're able to teach the masses. So we appreciate you and Maria, and also doing a deep dive and going through and trying to even understand everything that's coming out right now, because as we all know, it's so fast and rapid. So we definitely are here for you. If you want to connect with us here at Small Business for America's Future, please go to our website, which is www.smallbusinessforamericasfuture. There's no apostrophe needed for Americas, just with the s.org. We definitely thank you all for spending some time with us, and we definitely hope that you're able to get your questions answered and the loans and forgiveness that you need. Thank you guys so much for attending, and have a great evening.